This is how Christmas started in Nigeria, not the simplified version, not the classroom version, but the real story. Today on History They Never Taught Us. Before Christmas ever reached Nigeria, Nigeria already understood celebration. Long before December 25th, long before carols and church bells, communities across the land marked time, meaning, and spirituality in ways that had nothing to do with Europe or Christianity. Life was organized not by imported calendars but by seasons, cycles, and shared experience. Birth was celebrated, harvest was honored, death was remembered, transitions were marked. These were not casual events. They were deeply spiritual moments rooted in belief systems that connected people to ancestors, land, and community. Religion was not something practiced once a week. It was woven into daily life, into farming, trade, leadership, and family structure. There was no single Nigerian belief system, just as there was no single Nigerian culture. What existed instead was complexity. From the forests of the south to the savannas of the north, people understood the world through rituals that had been refined over centuries. Festivals were communal, not individual. They reinforced identity, belonging, and responsibility. Celebration was not just joy, it was continuity. This matters because when Christmas arrived, it did not arrive in a cultural vacuum. It entered societies that already knew how to celebrate, how to worship, and how to assign meaning to time. What Christmas would become in Nigeria was shaped as much by what existed before it as by what was introduced later. To understand how Christmas began in Nigeria, we must first discard the idea that it simply came as a holiday. It didn't. It arrived as part of a much larger historical process, one involving religion, power, and transformation. Long before Christianity, Nigerian societies already understood the idea of sacred birth, not in the Christian sense, but in the belief that life itself carried spiritual significance. Children were not just born, they were welcomed into a lineage, into a history that stretched backward and forward. Spiritual leaders, elders, and custodians of tradition played central roles in maintaining moral order. They interpreted signs, resolved conflicts, and preserved knowledge. Their authority did not come from written texts, but from memory, lineage, and trust. When Christianity eventually arrived, it did not simply offer an alternative faith. It challenged these structures directly. The earliest contact between Christianity and Nigerian societies did not happen through celebration. It happened through disruption. European traders and explorers were the first to arrive along the coasts, but religion followed soon after. Missionaries did not see themselves as cultural guests. They saw themselves as bearers of truth. And in their worldview, African spiritual systems were not equal alternatives. They were obstacles. This framing shaped everything that followed. Christianity was presented not just as a religion, but as a marker of progress. To convert was to advance. To resist was to remain backward. Faith became entangled with status, education, and access to opportunity. But in the early stages, Christmas itself played a very small role. There were no nationwide celebrations, no public holidays, no widespread excitement. Christmas was confined to mission compounds and church spaces. It was quiet, restrained, and strictly religious. At this stage, Christmas in Nigeria was not Nigerian at all. It was European Christianity practiced on African soil. The hymns were foreign, the rituals unfamiliar, the timing disconnected from local rhythms. December in Nigeria was not winter. There was no snow, no cold silence. Life did not pause. Farming cycles and trade continued. For most people, Christmas passed unnoticed. Yet something important was happening beneath the surface. Mission schools began teaching children about Christian holidays. Christmas stories were told alongside lessons in reading and writing. Nativity plays were performed by students learning a new worldview. Slowly, Christmas became associated with education. To know Christmas was to be schooled. To celebrate it was to be part of a new social class. This association mattered more than theology. As more Nigerians passed through mission schools, Christmas became familiar, not necessarily meaningful yet, but recognizable. It entered memory before it entered culture. Still, for decades, Christmas remained limited. The majority of Nigerians did not celebrate it. Many did not understand it. Others actively resisted it, seeing it as an intrusion into established belief systems. Christianity itself grew unevenly, spreading faster in some regions than others. Where it spread, Christmas followed, but always quietly, always under the shadow of foreign authority. What is often left out of classroom narratives is this truth. Christmas did not begin in Nigeria as a joyful national celebration. It began as a tool of religious expansion. And tools always serve a purpose. At this stage, Christmas was about discipline, order, and moral restructuring. It emphasized obedience, humility, and submission, values that aligned neatly with colonial objectives. Celebration was secondary, control was primary. Yet history is rarely one-directional. Nigerians did not simply absorb Christmas as it was presented. They observed it, questioned it, adapted it. Over time, meaning shifted. But that shift had not happened yet. In its earliest form, Christmas in Nigeria was fragile, limited, and deeply tied to power. It was a marker of difference between converts and non-converts, between the educated and the traditional, between the colonial world and the indigenous one. It did not unite, it separated, and that separation would define how Christmas evolved in the decades to come. Before Christmas became a season of travel, food, and family, it was a symbol of transformation under pressure. Before it became familiar, it was foreign. Before it became joyful, it was instructional. Understanding this beginning does not take away from what Christmas means today. It explains it, because every tradition carries the weight of how it began. And Christmas in Nigeria began not with celebration, but with encounter. An encounter between belief systems, between cultures, between power and adaptation. That encounter would shape everything that followed. Missionaries, power, and the first Christmas celebrations. Christmas did not spread in Nigeria through celebration. It spread through structure. When Christian missionaries moved inland from the coast, they did not come only to preach sermons. They came with institutions, churches, schools, clinics, and systems of discipline. These institutions became the vehicles through which Christian belief, European values, and colonial authority quietly took root. Faith was taught alongside obedience, religion alongside literacy, worship alongside hierarchy. For many Nigerians, the first encounter with Christianity was not through choice, but through proximity. A mission school offered education, a church offered protection, a clinic offered treatment. Conversion often followed access, and with conversion came Christmas. In the early missionary period, Christmas was not presented as a festive holiday. It was framed as a sacred obligation. Attendance at Christmas services was encouraged, sometimes required, especially for students and converts. The emphasis was on reverence, order, and submission, not joy or celebration. Christmas services followed strict European patterns. Hymns were sung exactly as taught. Sermons emphasized humility and salvation. The story of the birth of Christ was told not as a cultural narrative, but as moral instruction. This version of Christmas left little room for local expression. African drums were discouraged. Traditional songs were replaced. Indigenous rituals were condemned. To celebrate Christmas properly was to celebrate it correctly, and correctness was defined by missionary standards. In this sense, Christmas became a test. To celebrate it the right way was to demonstrate discipline. To reject it was to appear resistant, uneducated, or hostile to progress. Faith and compliance became intertwined. Yet even within this controlled environment, adaptation began quietly. Missionaries realized that total cultural rejection slowed conversion. Over time, hymns were translated into local languages. Bible stories were retold using familiar metaphors. Christmas sermons began to acknowledge African contexts, if only slightly. This was not acceptance, it was strategy. The goal was expansion, and expansion required compromise. Still, the earliest Christmas celebrations in Nigeria remained limited in scope. They took place mostly within mission compounds, schools, and church communities. Outside these spaces, life continued as normal. Markets remained open. Traditional festivals continued. December was not yet special. What made Christmas distinct was not its scale, but its symbolism. It represented entry into a new moral world. For converts, Christmas became a marker of belonging. It signaled that one had stepped into a global religious community that extended beyond local boundaries. It connected Nigerians to Rome, London, and Jerusalem, not physically, but spiritually. This connection carried prestige. Mission-educated Nigerians began occupying roles as teachers, clerks, interpreters, and administrators. Their exposure to Christian holidays, including Christmas, set them apart socially. Celebration became subtle but significant. Christmas began to mean education. Education began to mean opportunity. Opportunity began to reshape society. This is how Christmas gained influence before it gained popularity. Colonial administrators soon recognized the usefulness of Christian calendars. They aligned administrative routines with church schedules. Mission schools became pipelines for colonial staffing. Religious observances began to shape public life. Gradually, December 25th gained recognition beyond the church, not yet as a national holiday, but as a pause. Work slowed, offices adjusted, churches filled more visibly. Christmas became noticeable, even to those who did not celebrate it. Still, resistance remained strong. Many communities viewed Christmas with suspicion. It challenged ancestral belief systems. It disrupted established rituals. It demanded allegiance to a foreign narrative of creation, sin, and salvation. To many, Christianity, and by extension Christmas, was not just a religion, it was a threat to cultural continuity. This tension defined the period. Christmas in Nigeria was neither fully accepted nor fully rejected. It existed in a liminal space, respected by some, ignored by others, opposed by many. But history favors persistence. As generations passed through mission schools, familiarity grew. Children raised within Christian institutions carried Christmas into adulthood. They brought it into their homes, cautiously at first, then more confidently. The celebration remained modest, a church service, a shared meal, a moment of rest. There were no elaborate decorations, no public festivities, no commercial excitement. Christmas was solemn, structured, and restrained, yet something subtle was happening. Christmas was beginning to detach from missionaries. What had started as an instrument of religious discipline was slowly becoming a cultural reference point. People began to associate December with togetherness, with reflection, with pause. Meaning was shifting. This shift did not happen because missionaries intended it. It happened because Nigerians reinterpreted what they were given. They did what cultures have always done when faced with foreign traditions. They adapted. By the early 20th century, Christmas was no longer confined strictly to mission compounds. It had entered urban Christian households. It appeared in schools, churches, and emerging cities. It had not yet become national, but it was no longer marginal. The groundwork had been laid. Christmas had moved from control to familiarity, from discipline to tradition, from instruction to expectation. The next phase would change everything. Because when colonial authority expanded and formalized, Christmas would move from the margins of society to its center. And when that happened, Christmas would stop being merely religious. It would become political. Christmas became powerful in Nigeria not because it was loved, but because it was organized. As British colonial rule expanded and solidified, administration required structure, routine, and predictability. The colonial state needed calendars, schedules, and standardized pauses. Christianity, already embedded through missionary work, offered a ready-made framework. Christmas fit perfectly into that framework. Colonial offices began aligning their operations with Christian observances. Mission schools synchronized academic calendars around religious holidays. Churches, schools, and government institutions began moving together, creating a rhythm that slowly shaped public life. December 25th was no longer just a church date. It was becoming a social signal. Work slowed, schools closed, church attendance increased. Even those who did not celebrate Christmas became aware of it because society itself was beginning to respond to it. This was a turning point. Christmas was transitioning from a religious obligation into a cultural marker. Education played a decisive role in this shift. Mission schools expanded rapidly during the colonial period, producing a growing class of literate Nigerians who would later dominate clerical, administrative, and professional roles. These schools taught not only reading and writing, but time consciousness, weeks, months, holidays. Children learned that Christmas was important because authority treated it as important. Plays were performed, hymns were rehearsed, Bible stories were memorized. For many students, the nativity story became one of the earliest narratives they could retell fluently in English or their local language. Christmas entered memory through repetition. At the same time, colonial urban centers were growing. Cities like Lagos, Calabar, Onitsha, and Ibadan became hubs of Christian influence. Churches multiplied, printing presses produced hymn books and religious tracts. Christmas announcements appeared in newspapers. Visibility increased, yet the celebration remained restrained. Christmas was still serious, solemn, and controlled. Public joy was limited. There were no carnivals or loud festivities. Celebration meant church attendance, modest meals, and respectful behavior. This tone reflected colonial priorities. Christian morality emphasized discipline, restraint, and obedience. These values aligned neatly with colonial governance. Christmas reinforced order, not excess, reflection, not rebellion. But Nigerians were not passive recipients of this culture. They observed, interpreted, and gradually reshaped it. Within homes, Christmas began to take on a more personal meaning. Families gathered. Meals became slightly more elaborate. Children associated Christmas with rest and attention. Small gifts appeared, not as commercial transactions, but as gestures. Local ingredients replaced imported ones. Traditional foods were adapted to mark the day. Music shifted subtly as local melodies blended with Christian hymns. Christmas was being domesticated. Outside the home, markets responded. Traders noticed increased demand before Christmas. Cloth, food, and household items sold faster in December. The economy began to feel the season, even if celebration remained muted. This economic awareness mattered. It transformed Christmas from a spiritual moment into a period of preparation. As colonial society matured, Christmas became predictable. Predictability creates tradition. Tradition creates expectation. By the 1930s and 1940s, Christmas had become part of Nigeria's social calendar, especially in Christian-dominated regions. It was no longer questioned, it was anticipated, but it was still incomplete. Christmas had not yet crossed fully into national identity. It remained unevenly celebrated, more prominent in some regions than others. In many rural areas, traditional festivals still held greater importance. Christianity coexisted with indigenous belief systems, sometimes peacefully, sometimes tensely. What Christmas represented during this period was not unity, but transition. It symbolized a society moving from indigenous structures to colonial modernity, from oral tradition to written authority, from seasonal rhythms to calendar-driven life. And this transition was not neutral. It favored those who adapted quickly, those who attended schools, those who aligned with Christian institutions. Christmas became one more marker of social differentiation. To celebrate Christmas confidently was to belong to the emerging educated class. Yet, even as Christmas gained social weight, it remained foreign in form. The songs spoke of snow, the imagery showed winter landscapes, the rituals referenced distant geographies. This disconnect did not weaken Christmas. It invited reinterpretation. Nigerians began filling the gaps with their own meanings. Christmas became less about Bethlehem and more about homecoming, less about doctrine and more about togetherness. This shift accelerated as independence approached. As Nigerians began imagining themselves as a nation rather than a colony, they also began redefining inherited traditions. Christmas, already embedded in public life, was an obvious candidate for transformation. By the late colonial period, Christmas was no longer simply observed, it was expected. It marked the end of the year. It signaled pause. It offered relief from routine. It provided space for reflection and reunion. What had begun as a missionary ritual was now part of social time. And once a tradition enters time, once it reshapes how people plan, move, and gather, it becomes difficult to remove. Christmas had crossed that threshold. But its final transformation was still ahead, because when Nigeria gained independence, Christmas would be freed from colonial restraint and reshaped entirely by Nigerian culture. Independence did not erase Christmas from Nigeria, it released it. When Nigeria gained independence in 1960, the country began redefining itself, politically, culturally, and psychologically. Colonial authority receded, but colonial structures remained. Institutions built around Christianity, education, and administration did not disappear. They were inherited. Christmas was one of them, but without colonial restraint, Christmas changed character. What had once been solemn, quiet, and regulated began to loosen. Celebration expanded beyond church walls. Joy replaced restraint. Community replaced instruction. Christmas was no longer something Nigerians were taught to observe. It became something they chose to celebrate. Independence brought confidence. Nigerians were no longer merely adapting foreign customs under pressure. They were actively reshaping them. This shift mattered deeply. It allowed Christmas to move from obedience to expression. The church remained central, but it was no longer dominant in defining meaning. For many, Christmas began with worship and ended with celebration. Faith and festivity coexisted. Music changed first. Hymns blended with local rhythms. Choirs adopted indigenous melodies. Over time, gospel music emerged that spoke directly to Nigerian experience. Joyful, rhythmic, expressive. Christmas songs no longer sounded foreign, they sounded familiar. Food followed. Imported traditions were replaced or reinterpreted. Christmas meals became expansive and local. Families cooked dishes tied to identity and memory. Preparation itself became ritual. Women cooking together, men organizing logistics, children anticipating abundance. Christmas became communal. One did not celebrate Christmas alone. People traveled, sometimes long distances, to return home. Villages came alive, roads filled, cities emptied. The movement itself became part of the tradition. Christmas was no longer a date. It was a season. Markets reflected this transformation. December became a period of intense activity. Traders prepared early. Tailors worked late. Butchers stocked up. Celebration became economic as well as social. This commercialization did not strip Christmas of meaning. It expanded it. It made the season visible, tangible, and anticipated across social classes. Even those who were not Christian began participating. Christmas in post-independence Nigeria was no longer strictly religious. It became cultural. Muslim families shared meals with Christian neighbors. Traditionalists joined communal festivities. The boundaries softened. Christmas became a national pause, a moment when routines slowed, hierarchies loosened, and people gathered. For a country marked by ethnic and religious diversity, this mattered. Christmas offered a rare shared experience. But this transformation was not accidental. It reflected Nigerian values: community over individualism, celebration over austerity, presence over doctrine. Nigerians did not abandon the story of Christ's birth. They reframed it. The emphasis shifted from theological precision to moral meaning, peace, generosity, goodwill. Christmas sermons spoke less about sin and more about love, less about obedience and more about compassion. The message adapted to the social moment. By the 1970s and 1980s, Christmas had fully entered Nigerian popular culture. Music, radio, and later television amplified its reach. Seasonal programs aired. Christmas greetings became routine. The season became embedded in memory. For many Nigerians, childhood memories of Christmas are among the strongest they carry. The anticipation, the journey home, the food, the laughter, the sense of abundance. Even if resources were limited, Christmas became aspirational. To celebrate Christmas well became a marker of care, success, and belonging. Families saved for it. Migrants planned for it. Workers counted down to it. This aspiration did not erase hardship, it coexisted with it. For some, Christmas highlighted inequality. For others, it offered escape. But for almost everyone, it carried emotional weight. What made this version of Christmas distinctly Nigerian was not its origin, but its expression. The season was loud, joyful, colorful, social. Christmas no longer reflected European winter imagery. It reflected Nigerian heat, movement, sound, and togetherness. Decorations adapted, music adapted, meaning adapted. In becoming Nigerian, Christmas lost some of its original form, but gained relevance. It became a space where faith, family, and culture met. By the late 20th century, Christmas in Nigeria was no longer something to explain. It was assumed. It shaped calendars, expectations, and emotional rhythms. The transformation was complete. What had arrived as a tool of religious and colonial expansion had been absorbed, reworked, and claimed. Christmas was no longer foreign. It was Nigerian. But every tradition carries its history within it. And to understand what Christmas means today, one must still reckon with how it arrived and what it displaced. Because celebration does not erase memory, it layers over it. Today, Christmas in Nigeria feels natural, so natural that few people stop to question it, so familiar that its origins fade into the background, so embedded that it feels as though it has always been here. But history tells a different story. Christmas in Nigeria is not ancient, it is not indigenous, and it did not arrive by accident. It arrived through encounter between belief systems, between cultures, between power and adaptation. And over time, it was reshaped, softened, and absorbed into Nigerian life. This is what makes Christmas in Nigeria unique. It is not celebrated the way it is in Europe. It is not experienced the way it is in North America. It carries a rhythm, emotion, and meaning shaped by Nigerian realities. For many Nigerians today, Christmas is not primarily about doctrine. It is about returning home, returning to family, returning to memory. It is one of the few moments in the year when distance shrinks, when cities release people back to villages, when generations gather under one roof, when stories are retold and bonds renewed. This is not a small thing. In a country shaped by migration, economic struggle, and separation, Christmas has become a ritual of reconnection. It temporarily restores what everyday life pulls apart. For some, Christmas remains deeply spiritual. Church services are attended with reverence. Carols are sung with devotion. The story of Christ's birth still holds sacred meaning. For others, Christmas is cultural, a season of joy, rest, and generosity, a time to eat well, dress well, and share what one has. For many, it is both. This layering of meaning is not confusion, it is adaptation. Christmas in Nigeria is no longer owned by missionaries, colonial administrators, or foreign traditions. It is owned by families, communities, and lived experience. And yet, understanding how Christmas arrived does not reduce its value, it deepens it. Because history reminds us that traditions are not static. They are shaped by human choice. They change as societies change. They survive not because they are pure, but because they are useful, emotionally, socially, spiritually. Christmas survived in Nigeria because Nigerians gave it new meaning. But there is also another truth worth confronting. Christmas did not arrive alone. It arrived alongside cultural displacement, alongside the rejection of indigenous belief systems, alongside the idea that some traditions were civilized and others were not. Many indigenous festivals faded under this pressure. Some survived quietly. Others were reshaped or pushed to the margins. Christmas did not destroy these traditions by itself, but it benefited from a system that elevated one worldview above others. Recognizing this does not demand rejection, it demands honesty. History is not about choosing sides, it is about seeing clearly. When Nigerians celebrate Christmas today, they are not celebrating colonial domination. They are celebrating family, generosity, and shared humanity. But that celebration sits on top of a layered past, one shaped by power, resistance, and transformation. This complexity is what makes Nigerian Christmas meaningful. It is not simple, it is not pure, it is human. And perhaps that is the most fitting reflection of the season itself. Christmas in Nigeria tells a broader story about how cultures survive, about how people take what is imposed and make it their own, about how joy can emerge even from unequal beginnings. It reminds us that history is not just something that happens to people. It is something people respond to. Today, as music fills the air, roads fill with travelers, and homes fill with laughter, Christmas in Nigeria stands as proof of cultural resilience. Not because it erased the past, but because it adapted to it. Understanding this story does not take away the joy of Christmas. It explains why that joy feels the way it does. This is how Christmas started in Nigeria. Not the simplified version, not the classroom version, but the real story. On History They Never Taught Us. If this story changed the way you see Christmas in Nigeria, subscribe to History They Never Taught Us for more stories about our past that deserve honesty, not simplification. Before you go, tell us in the comments, what does Christmas mean to you personally? Faith, family, culture, or something else entirely? Your story is part of this history too.